Welcome to SplitSecond. If you want to buy the best sleeves or other magic-related accessories, head down to Dragon Shield using the affiliate link below.
We're looking for skilled pilots to join us on new episodes. We revamped our Patreon and this week we received Chris to play with us. Would you like to join us for the next game? Check out our Patreon below or ask in our Discord how to shuffle up with the SplitSecond team. Chris brought his version of Yuriko Turn and Burn. Bal is playing the old cEDH database version of Dihada Binder of Wills. As another special guest today, we receive once again Carlos from Kingdoms TV. If you don't know their channel, check out the description below or the link above to find even more great Commander content. And last but not least, our editor Josh is playing Nixilis Captive Kingpin. This list is a vending machine deck, meant to be lent out to new players and are catered to be more Commander oriented. Check out this list in the description below and consider recommending it to a friend who is trying out cEDH for the first time. Note, this video was recorded before Modern Horizons 3 came out, so there are no new cards from this set in these lists. Comment below if you're looking for a particular list being updated and played on the channel. Chris is going first and he kept his first 7 with a little bit of everything. Morphic Pool, Marsh Flats and Bloodstained Mire for lands, with an early drop to bring Yuriko on turn 2, Hope of Girapur. Orcish Bowmasters needs no introduction and can actually be recast if used to ninjutsu Yuriko. Limdol's Vault is great to find a big hitter for Yuriko like an extra turn or some needed interaction. Enter the Infinite is unfortunately already in hand, but if he brainstorms it to the top or through Scroll Rack, he can also allow it to be the top card and reveal through a Yuriko trigger. Bal mulliganed once and found a decent hand, City of Brass, Mana Confluence and Wooded Foothills for lands. Tithe Taker helps him during a turn he might go off. Lotho is great to help generate some ramp, and he has Goblin Engineer and Enlightened Tutor that he can try to find a bridge package with. Carlos was unfortunate to have to mulligan down to 6, having some trouble with lands, but his hand should be quite good from turn 3 on. Bloodstained Mire and Shivan Reef for lands with a Pongify for early interaction. From there, Ristic Study and the One Ring will make sure he draws enough to bring out his commander and have Deflect and Swat online. He sent Eye to the bottom. Finally, Josh kept his first 7, Swamp and Mountain for lands with a Reckless Signet for ramp, as well as Simian Spirit Guy. Rug of Smothering is somewhat of an unpayable Esper Sentinel alongside Rakdos, and then he can pivot his game plan with Vampiric and Demonic Tutor. Now, before the game starts, we have an announcement to do. October 25 to 27 we will be coming to MagicCon Las Vegas. That's right! If you're around, come meet us and play some games with us. Find your early bird tickets through the link in the description below. Now, ready for the match? Chris starts his turn with a Marsh Flats and cracks it for an Underground Sea and casts his Hope of Girapur, ending the turn. Bal plays a Wooded Foothills and passes. Carlos plays a Bloodstained Mire and passes. On just his upkeep though, Carlos decides to crack his fetch, fearing a Dark Ritual into Oppo, and this way Bal takes the time to crack his as well. He finds a Plateau and Carlos finds a Volcanic Island. Josh then draws, plays a Swamp and passes. Chris draws, plays a Morphic Pool and proceeds to combat. He sends Hope of Girapur towards Josh, and, with no blockers, he ninjutsus his commander Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. It connects and triggers, revealing an island, unfortunately. In his second main phase, Chris casts an Ornithopter and passes. In the end step, Bal fires his Enlightened Tutor and searches for a Mana Crypt to the top. He gets to his turn, draws it, plays a Mana Confluence and casts Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff. He then casts Mana Crypt, triggering Lotho for a treasure, which he cracks to cast Magda, Brazen Outlaw. However, in the end step, Carlos fires a Pongify on Magda, to be mana efficient before getting to his turn. Still in the end step though, Josh casts a Vampiric Tutor to find his own Mana Crypt to the top. Carlos gets to his turn, draws, plays a Shivan Reef and passes. Josh untaps, draws and casts Mana Crypt. He follows it with Reckless Signet, triggering Lotho, and Bal loses 1 and creates 1 treasure. Josh then finishes with his Rug of Smothering, passing to Chris. He draws, plays a Swamp and proceeds to combat. He sends both creatures towards Carlos, who despite having drawn into more removal, it is worthless since removing Yuriko can still make Ornithopter be ninjutsu. Carlos takes 1 and in response to the Yuriko trigger, Chris fires a Vampiric Tutor, triggering Rug of Smothering, losing 1 life. He searches for a Shadow of Mortality to the top, which he proceeds to reveal through the trigger, and his opponents all take 15 damage each. 45 damage in 1 turn. Put your eyes on these Winoto players, wink. We're back to Bal. He untaps and takes no damage from the Crypt. He plays a City of Brass and then casts Boromir, Warden of the Tower, triggering Rug of Smothering for 1 life. He then casts Goblin Engineer, triggering Lotho and Rug of Smothering again, for a total of 3 life loss and 1 extra treasure. With so many on-cast triggers, Bal actually forgets the most important of all, the Engineer's ETB, which could have easily found him LED or Grinding Station to the yard for future use. We're back to Carlos, and after drawing 3 cards since the beginning of the game, he found no lands at all, so that Ristic Study unfortunately sits down in his hand as he sadly passes. Josh untaps and is also safe from his crypt. He slam dunks his commander Nixilis. ready to go off in the next turn. Rug of Smothering pings him and then he proceeds to combat, sending said Rug towards Chris. He can't block, taking 1 life, and Nixilis triggers, exiling Rite of Flame, that he can cast until the end of his next turn. He then plays a Bloodstained Mire that he cracks for a Badlands. He does cast Rite of Flame, triggering Rug of Smothering and Lotho. Val loses 1 life, creates a treasure, and that in turn triggers Nixilis, now exiling a Senses Divining Top. Josh takes 2 from the rug and uses the floating red to help cast Senses Divining Top, triggering the rug again, this time for 3 life. Considering he helped build Chris's list and his life total is rather low, him and Bal start pondering options to survive another hit from Chris. After some table talk, it's understood that Carlos has another piece of removal, so Josh fires his Demonic Tutor, triggering the rug once more for 4 damage, and he finds Deadly Rollick, so he and Carlos can hopefully blow Chris's board with Bal cracking Boromir, so the Rollick can go through. And this way they all survive another turn cycle. In the end step though, Chris fires an Orcish Bowmasters, triggering the Rug of Smothering, losing 1 life, and then triggering Nixilis for an Imperial Seal. Bowmasters enters play and Chris pings Carlos, to hopefully have him in range to kill everyone in the next turn with his Limdol's Vault. This, however, triggers Nixilis and Josh exiles a Chrome Mox with it. Turn 4 and things are pretty much heated at this moment. Chris plays an island and goes to combat, sending everything towards Carlos. In response, Carlos fires a Rapid Hybridization towards Yuriko, triggering Rug of Smothering for 1 life and then triggering Nixilis for a Rolling Vortex. Yuriko dies and Chris gets a Fog Lizard, but still before damage he is able to ninjutsu Yuriko by bringing an Ornithopter back to his hand. The table discusses their options and Bal cracks Boromir, being tempted by the ring and making his ape the Ring Bearer. Now Josh is able to fire his Deadly Rollick, targeting Yuriko once more, and there goes Chris's dream to at least kill 2 opponents with 1 sweep. Josh loses 1 to his own rug, and as last-ditch effort, Chris still ninjutsus Yuriko once more, returning the unblocked Orci army back to his hand and hoping the RNG gods will reward this Yuriko trigger, with no more mana available for his Limdol's Vault. The top card is a Phyrexian Walker. In the second main phase, he casts said Phyrexian Walker, triggering Rug of Smothering for 1 life, in turn triggering Nixilis to exile a Green Monolith. Chris sadly passes the turn. Bal taps and takes no damage from the crypt. He draws and proceeds to cast his commander, Dihada, Binder of Wills, triggering Rug of Smothering and in turn Nixilis for a Reckless Fireweaver. He upticks Dihada in a desperate move to give his now legendary Ringbearer ape Vigilance, Lifelink and indestructible until his next turn. He attacks Chris, regaining 3 life and passes to Carlos. He draws and still no lands to be found, so he's unfortunately forced to pass. Josh untaps and still no damage from the crypt roll. He goes ahead and casts Imperial Seal, and only now players wake up and see he's going all in for the win. The rug triggers and he loses 1 life, and then 2 more from the resolution of the Imperial Seal, which finds him all will be 1 to the top. He proceeds to activate Senses Stop to draw a card, and then casts said all will be 1, triggering the rug once again, losing 2 life. Players slowly pass priority, hoping Carlos has something, but he unfortunately didn't find the 3rd land for his now drawn Fierce Guardianship. So Josh is safe to proceed to combat and attacks Chris with the rug, which deals him exactly 1 damage, triggering Nixilis to put a +1/+1 counter on itself, and exile a top card of his library. This, in turn, triggers all will be 1 to deal 1 damage to an opponent of his choice, which then triggers Nixilis and so on. He enters a loop that allows him to kill all his opponents by 1 ping at a time. GG. Since this was a fairly fast match, we decided to record another one. Once again, Chris won the dice roll and is going first. He mulliganed down to 6, finding a Scalding Tarn and Watery Grave for lands. Dothy Voidwalker is a great stacks piece, and often people forget its shadow evasion. Mistblade Shinobi and Sakashima Student enable more Yuriko triggers, and on themselves, one can bounce opposing creatures and the other can clone good stuff like Dockside Extortionists. Vampiric Tutor can help him pivot his game plan, and he sent Lotus Petal to the bottom. Bal mulliganed once and found quite a good hand, with a Verdant Catacombs and Niv-Mizzet for lands, paired with a Lotus Petal and Rakdos Signet for ramp. Hope of Girapur can help on deprive an opposing blue mage from interacting during an all-in turn, and then he can pivot his game plan with his tutors. Enlightened Tutor can find him Breach, and DT can maybe find him Flicker. This time Carlos found the lands he needed, and kept his first 7. Polluted Delta, Island and Steam Vents will definitely allow him to be more active this game. March of Swirling Mist and Chain of Vapor for removal, Arcane Denial for interaction and Resist Study to keep his hand filled. Finally, Josh was unfortunate to have to mulligan down to 5. He found a single swamp, unfortunately not a mountain though. Mana Crypt and Mox Ember will allow him to ramp, hopefully to that Birgi, God of Storytelling, and Disciple of the Vault is great paired with his commander. He sent Lightning Greaves and Immolation Shaman to the bottom. Ready for round 2? Chris sends it up with his Scalding Tarn, cracking it for an Underground Sea, and casts a freshly drawn Dark Ritual. With it, he casts a Dothy Voidwalker, and to be mana efficient, he uses the last black mana to cast his Vampiric Tutor. He finds a Mana Crypt to the top and passes. Bal plays a Verdant Catacombs and cracks it for a Badlands. He casts Hope of Yuriko and passes. Carlos plays a Polluted Delta and cracks it for a Volcanic Island, also passing. Josh hopes to top deck a red land, but he didn't. He plays a Swamp and casts Disciple of the Vault, shipping it to Chris. He draws, plays an untapped Watery Grave and goes to combat. He attacks Bal with Dothy, which is unblockable, so he ninjutsus Yuriko, connecting and triggering, revealing an ingenious prodigy, so he just passes. Bal draws, plays an Iron Mesa and cracks it for a Plateau. He casts a Rectus Signet and follows it with a Lotus Petal. He then goes ahead, casting Demonic Tutor by sacrificing the Petal, which triggers the Disciple and Josh pings Bal directly. He finds Flicker to hand and passes.
In the end step, Carlos fires a lightning bolt on Yuriko, wanting to use Interaction now to hopefully slow down whatever plan Chris tutored for.
Carlos gets to his turn, he plays an untapped Steam Vents paying 2 life and passes, holding some interaction. Josh reaches to the top deck and slams a Blood Crit on Tat, paying 2 life. He casts the Mana Crit and follows it with the first drawn card of the game, the One Ring. However, Carlos says no, not under his watch, with an Arcane Denial. Josh swings back at Carlos with his Disciple as his only possible response, and we're back to Chris. On his upkeep, Josh draws 2 cards and Carlos draws 1, from the Arcane Denial's delayed trigger. Chris then draws, fails a land drop but fires his Mana Crit this time. With it, he casts an Ingenious Prodigy X equals 2 and ends his turn. Bal top decks what he needed, a land, Gemstone Mine, entering play with 3 counters. He now considers the odds of going off over Disciple of the Vault, which are somewhat slim. He then goes into combat and attacks Chris with Hope of Girapur. It connects, dealing 1 damage, so on his second main phase, Bal cracks the Hope, so Chris can't cast non-Chris spells until his next turn. This triggers Disciple of the Vault, pinging him 1 damage. Bal then casts his commander, Dihada, Binder of Wills. It resolves, so he downticks her, revealing the top 4 cards of his library and putting no cards in hand, therefore creating 4 treasures. Having hit Orium's Chant, Bal now tries to play around a possible Mindbreak trap from Carlos, and puts Underworld Breach on the stack as his second spell, cracking 2 treasures and being pinged by 2 triggers from Josh's Disciple of the Vault. Breach resolves, so now Bal escapes Orium's Chant, targeting Carlos, triggering Disciple for another ping. Mindbreak Trap is now online, however, Carlos has no response to that. This way, Bal now escapes Mana Crypt, leaving a single DT in his yard. Cracking another treasure, he casts Flicker, targeting Dihada, and Disciple pings him again. Dihada is flickered and enters freshly refilled with Loyalty, so Bal can downtick her again. He reveals the 4 cards of his deck and actually finds Birgi, which he does put in hand, since eventually it would mean cracking less treasures to flicker Dihada again, hoping to find removal for that Disciple. He creates 3 treasures and escapes Flicker again, targeting Dihada, cracking 1 treasure and using the floating mana. Disciple triggers and Josh pings him again. Dihada is blinked and Bal downticks her again, revealing the top 4 cards and putting all into his graveyard, having found the removal he needs. However, he's still a bit behind on Escape Fodder, so he escapes Flicker once more, targeting Dihada, cracking 2 treasures and triggering Disciple twice. Dihada is flickered and Bal activates her again, revealing 4 cards and putting them into the yard, creating 4 more treasures. He now casts Birgi from hand, cracking 3 treasures and being pinged 3 times. He now escapes Galadriel's Dismissal, targeting Disciple of the Vault, cracking 1 more treasure, triggering Birgi and Disciple as well. He gets rid of Disciple for good, and now he can safely demonstrate a loop where he cracks 1 treasure and uses Birgi's red floating mana to escape Flicker, targeting Dihada and triggering Birgi for 1 red mana again. Dihada is flickered and he activates her to semi-mill himself 4 cards, creating 4 treasures. This means 3 treasures and 1 extra card in the graveyard for each iteration. The slight caveat though is that Bal already attacked his turn, and in order to win he needs to do the dual caster mage combo on his first main phase, so he escapes Sevin's Reclamation through Underworld Breach, bringing Mayhem Devil into play, and because he escapes Sevin from the graveyard he gets to copy it and return Lurrus back into play. With Lurrus he can cast Grand Abolisher from his graveyard, so he is sure he can go off during his next turn. Next turn you say? He now escapes Final Fortune. This way, during his next turn he can use Lurrus' ability to cast Breach from the graveyard, and from there he escapes Twin Flame on Mayhem Devil, holding priority and escaping Dual Caster Mage in response. It enters play and he targets Twin Flame, which gets copied, and he targets Dual Caster Mage to infinitely create enough copy tokens with haste and kill his opponents through combat. GG. Thank you for joining us for today's match everyone. If you would like to play with us in our matches, check out our Patreon below. Speaking of which, we'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons, and especially Izanagi, Ajimo, Drunken Housecat, Pina, Ricardo, Katarina, Zenon, Chris and Travis, our stack breakers. If you want to support us, you can do so by liking this video, subscribing or by becoming a patron yourself. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment below, it greatly helps the channel. You can also take a look at one of these videos here.